Okay. First of all, Yfke, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your brilliant short film, Lili. I absolutely love watching it. I've watched it so many times now, and it's every time it's so impactful, and it's one of those films where every time you watch it, you notice like a different thing. Like a different thing pops out of me every time. It's just there's so much detail. It's just brilliant.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to hear that. And thank you guys for having me. This is like really, really awesome to be able to talk long distance about the film.
Yeah, my pleasure. So the first thing I wanted to ask you was what was your inspiration behind the film and why now?
So it was, I mean, it's clearly inspired by Me Too, but kind of, I think, two different parts of that. So when Me Too happened for me, it was like this big thing of like, ah, yes, finally, and also just this relief of we're so much stronger than we think we are. And that I like, Lily's kind of my personal reaction to that. On the other hand, it was also when it happened, there were still a lot of people that I would hear saying like, this is kind of like a bullshit movement and it's just people, looking for attention and it's not that hard to say no. And that got me really angry because I was like, no, how do you not get this? And then it's like, oh, wait, they actually don't get this. They don't know what this feels like. They don't get this situation. And so the other half of it was trying to create what this feels like how trapped you can feel and how lost and how hard it is to get out of that situation. So those were kind of the two things that came together with it.
Yeah, I love the idea what you just said about being trapped because I think that definitely comes across in the audition setting.
Good.
So did you always have in mind to have it as an audition? Was that always what it was going to be?
Yeah, the weird thing is it was like I sort of had like a snippet of an idea for it that I walked around with for a while, and suddenly I was walking home one day and just the whole script just kind of like weirdly downloaded like in my head. So I wrote it pretty quickly, and it was always just that's the way I looked at it. It's like, yeah, it's an audition, and it just kind of slightly always kind of goes further and further where you're like, is this, can I speak up? Is this uncomfortable? Like you kind of like want to go through her head of like understanding if I say something, he's going to say it's all bullshit, and like where exactly can I say this is crossing the line? Mm-hmm. And it just maybe also because I'm in the film world, that just seemed like a good setting for it.
Yeah, definitely. And like in horror as well, like being trapped is so effective in so many films, whether it's being trapped in a an actual physical situation or being trapped in like a bad relationship or something. And what we get in Lili is she's trapped in like the audition space because it's just her and one other person, and anything can happen. But I think she's also trapped in the sense that she's forced to kind of be polite, and she's forced to kind of go along with things that she maybe doesn't want to do. So yeah, there's so
she's dependent on him for the role, for like he's in a position of power, and you don't want to fuck up the one chance that you might have, and maybe he is really just pushing her to a better performance. Like you kind of like, I've definitely, the situation I've been in, it's like your gut's telling you get the hell out of this, like this is wrong, this is not right, but your head's like, no, maybe it is, maybe I'm just misreading it, maybe it's probably just me, like I'm the one who's at fault here. And it's very much that, and then realizing like, no, you're actually, listen to your gut is right in these instances.
Yeah, so have like some of your own experiences inspired this film then?
Well, I mean, I'm not an actress, so that helps a lot, that I've never actually had to audition. But I think every female has been in, and a lot of men as well have been in a situation like this. And that can be, film industry, other industry, just, being at a bar, like there's a million of these kind of, the feelings where your gut's like, nope, this is wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's definitely something that feels very real for many women that have been in that situation. Did you find it quite challenging writing the script and then filming it visually? Was it quite sort of difficult to play that out?
It was it's like writing it was very cathartic. It was like, okay, great, I got it out. And filming it was like both a lot of fun because you have these great actors and you can just see them like almost like a Wimbledon match, like going back and forth in a rally, which is great. But even while editing it, and like even on set, the moment he like comes behind her just always made me so uncomfortable, which is good.
Yeah. Oh, it's just like a masterclass in creating an uncomfortable situation because it just goes from like things that could be perceived as like normal or acceptable, and then it gets like gradually more uncomfortable, and then things that are kind of definitely inappropriate are passed off as like small things, like, oh, could you just undo a button, that kind of thing. Yeah.
No, it's been fun like watching it. It premiered before like COVID and lockdown and all of that. So I had I was lucky enough to see it a few times with like at a festival with like a full house. And I get very nervous for screenings. So those were very hard for me. So I'm like, thank God it's only 10 minutes. But it was always a lot of fun to kind of feel the crowd just get more and more uncomfortable as it went on. I'm like, oh, yes, good.
Oh yeah, yeah. I bet it's a really good one to watch with an audience, because I bet the discomfort is palpable.
Yep.
So, what about the Me Too era did you think spoke to a horror narrative in particular? I'm quite interested in that.
I think in general, the beauty of horror is that you get to put your own fears in things, but also your own, you know, finding your own strength, like things that it's things that you want to deal with. Like I'm not brave at all in life, and I'm not a very eloquent speaker or anything like that. So a lot of it I get to put in a movie, because that's the way that I know how to express myself. And I love genre piece specifically for that. I mean, I see reality every day, so I'm like fine with this. Anything I can do to like heighten reality, I really like. And it's just a great way to, you know, face the monsters. So it's a fun genre to be in, and like especially this, like Me Too has affected people so much, that it's a very good way to deal with it in like a script form, in like a personal form, in like, you know, this is what I learned from this is what I took away from it, and this is, you know, the strength that we have.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you have a favorite horror film, and did you draw on any particular horror films to inspire Lili?
I have a deep love for The Shining.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that
definitely.
movie like scares the shit out of me. But I was actually on, you know, to give you guys a plug, Ghouls Magazine. You guys have a really interesting article on Wendy in The Shining, and the character of Wendy, like played by Shelley Duvall. And it was kind of eye-opening for me as well, because we've always kind of perceived her as like the weakest character in that movie, and she's always like kind of like screaming, and she's not really using the weapons that she has very well. But the article kind of like threw it back and said like, no, she's actually, you know, she survives, and she doesn't just save herself, she saves her son. Like, she's basically coming out of this a survivor, and we should stop looking at her as like this you know, this basket case. And I think that's something that's happening in horror more and more, is that I mean, we've always had the final girl, but it's always one specific type. And now it's nice to see that it's kind of opening up. Like, I love Revenge is another movie that I think is brilliant. And yes, she's totally a hot power babe, but she's also the slutty girl. Technically, she was supposed to die first, and now she gets her revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that that's starting to happen in horror movies. And I think that's, I mean, women are, you know, we're not just one type. We're messy. We're everything. But we all have a strength. Like, I think also, you know, I'm a child of the 80s, so we still had like we're the weaker race technically, or the weaker gender. And I think now we're starting to realize that we're not. Like, we might not always be physically the strongest, but we do have a lot of strength, and I think we're starting to use it. And it's just becoming, you know, all different types of women are now allowed to fight back and survive. And I think that's really cool. And that's definitely something I would want to, you know, do more with as well. It's been when we were doing, I'm going to head into some spoiler territory, so sorry for people who haven't seen the movies. You can pause now, you can watch it, it's 10 minutes. But so our special makeup effects guy, Rogier Samuels, who is absolutely fucking brilliant, and I was super lucky to have him on board. And so he designed the teeth. And we kind of talked about it. He's like, you know, what do you have in mind? I'm like, well, two things. I want them to be functional. Like, when you see them, I want people to go like, okay, I can see how that can, you know, rip through flesh. And I want them to not be hot. Like, I don't want them to be sexy. And he's like, okay, cool. And so he started designing, and he designs this like brilliant thing. And only after shooting, he came up to me. He's like, you know, the offhanded comment of don't have him be sexy was kind of the hardest note to incorporate. He's like, you're so used to, when you see pictures of like female demons, they're all like sexy, but all very male gazy as well. which is fine that also exists, but I specifically wanted the other route of like, no, this is not, and she's not here for the male gaze. She's here for the female gaze, and she's here to symbolize strength and not sexiness. And that was a fun thing to play with in the movie a lot.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the ending, because I've been dying to talk about it, and I've been thinking, shall I? I don't know if it's sort of spoilery, but yeah, especially the mouth. The mouth fascinates me because, as you say, like women's mouths are so kind of like sexualized in sort of media in general, but definitely in horror, like the kind of sexy female vampire we see like everywhere. But there's nothing about the mouth that's sexy. It's like a pure monstrous mouth. I loved it.
We wanted to, because Lisa's like gorgeous, and it was so cool to see it completely change, her face and her physique. And we're like, man, we really wanted to start a Tinder profile with her, like, with the teeth in. See how that would go.
You should. Oh, well, because you mentioned the ending, there's something I wanted to ask. So, are there clues along the way to what we see at the end? Or did you intend for it to be like a surprise?
There's a little bit of both. Like there's definitely certain lines that I didn't even read. I think that writing is sometimes also a very subconscious thing. And only later did I realize that some of the notes he gives her of like, you're the strong one, you're the one who's on top. She is from the beginning. Like she's in control from that situation from moment one, except he doesn't know it. So there's I don't think you pick up on them immediately, but there's also the whole, and not a lot of people pick up on this. Lili is short for Lilith. So there's throughout the whole movie, there are little Lilith hints, which is more like fun little Easter eggs. It's not necessarily like that. That's something I put in there when I wrote. I let it go when I directed it, because like when I was talking to the actress, I'm okay, we never really discussed this, but more like we never discussed Lilith, but more like who is she? Where does the strength come from? And she played it saying like, all women have a strength inside of us that we don't know we have, and suddenly can just like ignite. And I thought that was really cool. So that's what we played with in the directing. But if you do look back, even like in the way Lili is written, there's like little hints to like Lilith in there as well. So those are, if anybody wants to go back to it and look at it that way, there's hints in there too.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to go back and watch it like another 10 times to see all these clues. Yeah. So did you intend to have Lili as a character that kind of knows what she's doing and she's deliberately toying with the director, or was she genuinely an actress in that audition as well?
We did different takes, which the fun thing is it was such an easy setup that we spent a lot of time just like, oh, let's try another one, but let's try this, or let's try this motivation. And so we played all of them, and the actors being as brilliant as they are, all of them worked. So the hardest thing in the editing for me was like, man, which one of these 10 really good takes should I go with? And it was cool to see how like they all had like slightly different interpretations in there as well. And I can't actually remember what the note was for the take that we picked. I think it was like take number 2, so we could have wrapped within an hour, but we just kept on going because it was so much fun.
Yeah. So something I also wanted to ask is about the casting. So the actors are like really brilliant, and especially Lisa Smith, who I think flexes every acting muscle possible in her role. Like it's so detailed, her performance. So how was the cast chosen for this film?
I got so lucky with both of them. So Lisa is a very dear friend of mine, and so we'd worked together before, and I wrote the script with her in mind, knowing that she could just like nail it. So I was never really worried about if that was going to work or not. I'm like, no, if I have Lisa, we're totally fine. And I don't know what I would have done if she would have said no. Then I probably wouldn't never have made it. So I'm very happy that she said yes. And then for the man, it was he's never in frame. So we could have, if we wanted to, just do a voiceover, like cast someone to just record later the voice and just have a stand in there. We chose specifically not to do that because it's such an intimate acting thing between the two of them that I didn't want Lisa to have to like act opposite a wall. But I fear like the better the person on the other side, the better both of their performances are probably going to get. Like I'm going to get way more out of it if I have two really great people. And so Dirk de Lind, who plays the man, is well, one of Holland's most famous actors probably, and I'm like someone who I've been a fan of for so long. Like he's in Soldiers of Orange, which is one of my favorite movies, and he's also like little geek out moment. He's like the lead in the Poltergeist TV show. Like he's done all these really cool things. But I thought like that's never, we're never gonna get him. So I remember talking to Lisa about like kind of what type I was looking for. I'm like, ideally I'd have someone like Derek because A, he's really good, but B, he almost has like a fatherly calm to him. Like he's just very like, when you hear his voice, you don't think like, oh God, run out of the room, he's creepy. It's like this is this very nice guy who can make you feel at ease. So I kind of was explaining that to her, like someone like that kind of type. She's like, yeah, why don't I just text Derek and see if he wants to do it? I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool. And so she did, and he like yeah, and I think he wanted to act with Lisa as well, and he liked the script. He's like, yeah, cool, I'm in. And then it's like the weird thing, you have to meet with him, and like my mind's going like, oh my god, I'm just trying to sit there like be all calm. But it was awesome having the two of them, and also it made it kind of the easiest thing in the world to direct, because it's a 10-minute take. Everybody just sat down. It was a very small crew, and they just went at it. You go yell action and just watch him go, and it was so cool to see.
Yeah, so perfect cast. It's really interesting what you said about Derek's character being kind of fatherly, because that definitely comes across like in the film. I mean, I think at the beginning he says, "Oh, my daughter's called Lily," and he kind of creates this like relaxing presence, and it kind of makes it even more disturbing that it gets quite uncomfortable, and he almost kind of exploits that father figure role. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you don't expect it, but that's kind of what happens a lot of the times, that you, and it also again, that makes your mind go like, no, I'm misreading this. This isn't what he means. Like he has so much experience. He knows how to get a good performance out of me, and in a way, her performance is constantly getting better. But it's also he's crossing way too many lines that he shouldn't be crossing.
Yeah, and it kind of made me think as well when when someone's been like outed as an abuser on Twitter, and then sometimes men say things like, "Oh, I would never do such a thing as a father." It's always like, "Oh, as a father, they should know better," and it's kind of like it's irrelevant, like, but the kind of father figure is always sort of used as like a, "Oh, they would never do this," or "I would never do this because I'm a father." It's a way of like making women feel comfortable, but in this situation it's exploited, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and it was when I was talking with him, like with both the actors, I did a character talk ahead of time, just like separately, of like, who is this person, where's backstory, and I asked Derek at one point as well, like, what if she would say halfway through the audition, like, I don't feel comfortable doing this, like, what do you think his reaction would be? He's like, oh, he would immediately say, no, that's not at all what I'm going for. Like, I could even think that. I'm just trying to coach you to be better. Like, fine, if that's not what you want. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it so hard to speak up as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I was really struck by the dialogue of the film. So in the scene that they're acting out in the audition, there are lines like, did you do it? And is it true? And it creates like this really tense atmosphere. So I wondered what your sort of thoughts behind the dialogue were, and what effects you wanted to create with those lines.
Mostly I just wanted something very generic, like something that could be played a lot of different ways, and then seem complete, like something for her to play with, of like, okay, you can play it as if you're the femme fatale, you can also play it as if you're not the one in control. Like I was looking for generic stuff, and this kind of came out. So I wish there was like a super smart answer to it, of like there was all this meaning behind it, but it was literally like I needed something that she could play with.
I think, I mean, even though, as you say, it's like generic, it sort of comes across like really significant in the context of the whole scene. Because I mean, like the lines like, did you do it? And it kind of suggests that like she's going to get in trouble for saying something. And I think it really speaks to the like Me Too idea of like, you better not say anything kind of thing. Like I think, yeah, it takes on like a whole new significance, I think.
Good, yeah, let's go with that. That was all planned.
Yeah. No, it's great, yeah. So in terms of the filming as well, the film is made in one continuous take, which I thought was such an interesting approach. So what effect did you want to create with that?
Also kind of like a dual thing. Children of Men is another movie that I think is brilliant, and they have two of these really long takes. And I remember watching that in the theater and thinking like, oh man, this is the fact that there's no cut almost feels like I can't blink. Like I'm like so into this moment because of that. And so I've always wanted to try that in something. And for this one, it felt right within the story because you want to trap her in his gaze. Like it's also why we're kind of like slowly pushing in, like we're creeping in on her. She's getting more and more uncomfortable. And as an audience, you're not allowed to look away. Like you have to experience this with her and the way he's perceiving her, which I was hoping would add to the uncomfortableness of the whole thing.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely does. It's absolutely like what you said about you know, not being able to look away. Like you're sort of trapped, you're kind of stuck in the scene with Lily, and we're kind of experiencing it like she's experiencing it. And yeah, it creates that tense atmosphere of like it's just so uncomfortable, and it's like never ending.
Yeah, shout out to my sound designer Marcel on this as well. That he because we shot in a studio in Amsterdam, and I mean it's quiet, but there's always street noise, and not much, but there's always like, and he took everything out. So the only noise you actually hear is the two of them talking, and it I didn't even realize what a huge impact that would have, but it makes it, first of all, it makes it even more uncomfortable because even as a human, you're always used to having something in the background, even if you don't register it. It's always, you know, you're not alone because there's more. And by taking it all out, you also take out her basically any sense of help. Like there's no footsteps out in the hallway of someone who could potentially come in. Like she's truly alone in his void. And I thought that was that, like that never even crossed my mind to do that, and he did, and I'm like, oh man, this is, and like you don't consciously pick up on it, but I think it definitely adds to the uncomfortableness and the creep factor of and the trapness.
Yeah, do you know what? That's something that didn't jump out at me when not the many times that I've watched it, but I'm definitely going to watch it again and think about, yeah, the background or the lack of background noise. Yeah, and like what you just said about it kind of takes away any sense of help. I mean, like that's, yeah, so interesting because it definitely kind of adds to the sense of being trapped and the sort of mounting fear and threat. Yeah, definitely.
No, that was all him. Like he did a pass on the sound design and send it back to me, and I'm like, why is this 10 times more uncomfortable? He's like, oh, because I took away the back. I'm like, okay, thank you, that's great.
Yeah, it's like deadly quiet, and then obviously the noises that we hear at the end, it kind of magnifies those like monstrous noises, and it's great.
Those were so much fun. Like I love playing with like blood on set. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So with the ending, so that takes place like off camera. So did you always intend to have it off camera, or was there a moment where you were thinking, should we kind of film this?
Now, I've always wanted it off camera. Practical reasons, because it's cheaper. So that helps. But also because you don't quite know what's happening. So it's kind of left to the interpretation of like, is it him? Is it her? Is what exactly is this? And then when she comes up, just having it completely flip of, you know, she was in control all along.
Yeah, yeah, no, it definitely like creates that sense of ambiguity because yeah, you don't know what's happened until you start hearing the sort of munching noises, or maybe not even, and then you see the bloodied mouth, and then you're like, oh wow, that's amazing.
She had a lot of fun, Lisa, playing that as well. Like, and those teeth are like, they're sharp, so we had to be very careful when we had them in. And then I think we started with, because that's like a separate take, because she could come back in, and so we could quickly put the teeth in, and we did like a whole bunch of them, and every time we'd add a little bit more blood because I wasn't sure what the right amount was. And I think we went for the last take where I'm like, more blood, like yes.
Yeah, it's the perks of acting in horror. It's always fun.
Yep.
So another thing I wanted to ask is, something I'm always like really interested in film is costume, and so I wondered what input you had in the costume choices. So Lily wears like a white blouse, and the blood kind of really shows up at the end, and I think the blouse is really significant. So I wondered what input you had on that.
Well, we definitely wanted the blood to stand out, and the more it could stand, if you put her in a solid white, then you're gonna have that blood's really gonna shine. So I didn't want her in red or anything else that might dilute that. And also, there's something still virginal about white, like it kind of adds to her innocence. But then we found this blouse, which is like cool, that it had like a little tiny little accent of black in it. So there's a tiny little, there might be more to it than than you think. But just keeping it as innocent basically as we could until the end.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love the idea of having like a little bit of the sort of the darkness in it. Like I love it when costume is like really significant because it's always a way of like conveying storytelling like non-verbally. I always find that fascinating. And I
Now
think
we were again
like
lucky that we could find this, because it's just super low budget. So it was literally like, what does H&M have? How can we
yeah.
use this? And they had this, we're like, perfect, we're going for it.
Yeah. And it even like serves the plot in interesting ways because, if she was wearing like a t-shirt or something, you couldn't ask someone to just take off their t-shirt because that's like
Yeah.
explicitly inappropriate, but you could potentially get away with asking someone to unbutton one button and that would, I mean, it's inappropriate still, but it could be
Yeah.
like
No,
passed off
exactly. Like
as
to loosen
nothing.
her up, or to,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
embrace the character. Yeah. No, and it was like we kind of wanted her to like, this is an audition that she really wanted to nail. So she really put time and effort probably into, okay, what am I gonna wear? And like, okay, I'm gonna, be a strong woman, like be a grown up, like have a collar, like look, like really come across professionally, and then also, have that be used against her.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's doing like so many things. Yeah, it's like professional, it's virginal, it's all sorts. Yeah, yeah. It's a really great choice. So, one final question from me. What can we see from you next? And are there any new projects that you'd like to plug?
I'm pitching 2 features at the moment. So if anybody has lots of money that wants to invest in
Yeah.
them, that'd be more than welcome. And so they're kind of thematic sister movies to Lily, in a way. Like they're very different, but they still all deal with the same themes of fighting back and overcoming the monsters, and there's some blood in them as well. So that's
Oh, yeah.
good.
We always want to see blood.
Exactly.
Oh well, Ivka, it's been so nice to talk to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat. And I look forward to seeing what you're going to do next.